Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Positively Atheist. Today, I'm going to be talking about the moral argument for God. And I'm going to be taking a slightly different approach than what you may have heard from a lot of other people who deal with this argument. It's been dealt with a bunch of different ways, and I've heard a lot of different discussions about it. The moral argument from God is a very popular argument to try to make a case for the existence of God, that God is reasonable because of this case. And it comes in a bunch of different flavors and it's been dealt with in a bunch of different ways. But like I said, I think my take on this is a little bit unique and hopefully you'll enjoy it. So the moral argument from God, his base is 3 points. If God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. Um, Two, objective moral values do exist. Three, therefore God exists. So I actually want to take these in reverse order and deal with them as we go along. So we're going to start off with the last one, therefore God exists. Obviously, I disagree with that, and I'll explain why I think I can make flip this on its head and actually make the reverse case. And actually, it makes a lot more sense in the way I'm going to present it. The second point is objective moral values do exist. That's what the claim is. I take issue with this, and I'm not sure that there's a way to actually show this is the case. And I know a lot of you people, your knee jerk reaction is like, "Oh, what do you mean you don't believe objective morals exist? So you just believe people can do whatever they want to do?" And the short answer is, yeah. In fact, people already do. People do exactly what they want to do all the time, and in addition to that, what they do tends to be completely different from what other people do. I mean, think about this. You can take, let's just take within Christianity itself, within a specific church. You can go walk into a church, any particular church in the United States for the most part, and you can ask a series of questions regarding morality and positions on different topics, right? And let's just say, and you can make up a nice test, maybe 10, 20, or 30 questions regarding different questions about morality. What's the right decision to make in certain circumstances versus other circumstances, and how to know the difference. And you will get pretty much all kinds of different answers from all kinds of different people sitting in the same. It could be two people sitting in the same pew next to each other who have been attending church the same amount of time together, and they will come up with different answers on what is moral and what's not. uh, in addition, if everybody shared the same morality, then why do we have all these laws trying to keep people from doing quote unquote bad things? I mean, the thing is that everybody does what's at the end of the day, everybody does what they think is right, what they think is the best course of action. Nobody's making decisions and thinking this is the worst possible decision I can make. People are doing actions because at in the moment they that their action is corresponding with their set of beliefs about what the action they should take. And in other words, you have some people who don't see anything wrong with killing other people, right? Because how do I know that? Because they do it. Because their actions show what they actually, and they may even say, "Oh no, I think it's wrong." But what do their actions show? Their actions show what their real intent is, right? So people think it's okay to steal a pen or a paperclip from a bank, right? To take that with you without getting permission. Some people think it's fine. Some people think that's wrong. Some people think it's wrong to kill any living thing. You know, we have some sects of uh, Buddhism, and I think it's Jainism, and different other types of those types of Eastern type religions where they don't even want to step on an ant or kill an ant. But yet, some of us, especially in Western culture, will just without even thinking just bulldoze an entire couple acres, build housing on in apartments without even thinking about the ants that we kill. Like we kill ants by the billions, right? So the idea that somehow we all have this objective moral framework that we all agree on, I think is obviously false. It's obviously incoherent. It doesn't really comport with what we know reality to be. The fact is, everybody has different opinions about what is okay to do, what's a good thing to do and what's a bad thing to do. Now, this brings us to the first of the premises. It says, if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. I would actually flip this on its head and say, actually, if God does exist, then objective moral values cannot exist. Okay, so I'm actually going to flip this completely on its head. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we look at, I'm going to try to share my screen if I can. I'm not sure how to. I'm using the new software. I think I'm not sure if I can actually do this. Okay, so let's look at a couple of terms. First of all, the word objective. Okay, the word objective means not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering and representing facts. Okay, and then let's look at the word relative. What is the word relative? Because when we're talking about objective facts, we're going to have to compare objective to what's we call relative. So a statement or a fact or a position or a thought is either going to be objective or it's going to be relative. So the word relative means considered in relation or in proportion to something else. Okay. So in other words, relative is a dependent phrase. It's dependent on something else, right? So an objective moral statement would be, it's always wrong to chew gum on Sundays, right? If you could, that would be something someone might say, well, that's an objective statement. But if I were to say, well, I don't really feel that way, then that would be considered a relative moral statement, right? Because different people have different opinions on it. So what Christians want to do is they want to say, well, we can't have a world without objective morality, right? We can't have a world where everybody just kind of makes it up on their own, where everything is relative. So morality must be objective. Well, here's the problem. As soon as you enter into the idea of a God, you run into a major problem with the idea of there being objective morality. What do I mean by that? What I mean is this. Supposedly, God is by definition is kind of the idea of God is the idea that there is this being, this entity that has basically created everything, the law, the rules of reality itself, right? The ideas within it, the structures, the subatomic particles, all the way up to the largest realities, including the laws that govern them, and supposedly the moral laws. But here's the problem: if it's true that all morality or the rules of morality come from God, that means they're by definition subjective to God, which makes them relative to God. So, in other words, if there's a God that created everything, then morality itself would be subjective to that God. So that God could today flip over and say, well, today it's okay to kill babies. That's what the God could say. Or he could say, today it's okay to chew gum on Sundays. Because morality, being a creation of him, dependent on him and relative to him, is now a subjective concept. So my argument is simply, if there's a God, then you cannot have objective morality. If there's a God, all morality by definition is subjective. All morality is relative to his mind. And so this one concept flips the whole argument of morality on its head. And actually we're gonna flip it around and say, well, if God does exist, objective morality cannot exist. Now, what this does for the theists and a lot of religious people is it's kind of a shocking moment, because we're introducing the idea that objective morality may not exist, right? Now, here's the thing. I actually can't make the full second the second point, which is to say the Christians want to say objective moral values do exist. I want to argue, I don't know if we can make that case. I don't know if we can make the case that objective moral values do exist or don't exist. And what I mean is that it could be theoretically possible that there is some type of force or some type of natural process in the universe that creates moral values. I mean, just imagine like a immaterial moral value creating machine that produces moral values and basically deposits them into our minds, right? We can imagine, as far-fetched as that sounds, the situation in which there is a natural explanation for moral values, and we could even make a case that under such a circumstance that those values would be by definition objective, because they're not dependent on a person's mind, a person in this case being God or ourselves. These are objective values. Maybe these values are created objectively through the forces of nature, right? So they're not dependent on my thoughts, they're not dependent on your thoughts, they're not dependent on anybody else's thoughts, no matter who the person is, including this supposed God. So here's the thing. We don't know if objective moral values do exist, right? There doesn't seem to be a way for us to actually know this answer. It seems like they don't, but that's a very unpleasant feeling for a lot of us, and we don't really like that idea that objective moral values don't exist, right? So we kind of would prefer that we live in a world where there is an objective right or wrong, right? And we kind of would prefer that world. But here's the thing. Even though we don't know if objective moral values exist, if they do exist, if we can show they do exist, then by definition, God can't exist. And conversely, if God does exist, then objective moral values can't exist. Because in order for something to be objective, it has to be not influenced by personal feelings or opinions, and considering and representing the facts. And as soon as you introduce the idea of a God, you no longer have the capacity for objective morality to even possibly exist, because as soon as God is introduced as a concept, all those values make themselves subject to the Creator, subject to the mind of God, and you lose the ability to have those objective values. So once again, just quick summary. We don't know. There doesn't seem to be any way for us to know whether or not objective values actually exist, objective moral values. But we can say that if they do exist, then God can't exist. Because if God exists, those values no longer are objective. They become subjective. They become relative to its mind. And so this is an argument to flip the moral argument on its head and address the concerns that a lot of theist apologists and Christian apologists are putting forward, trying to make people afraid of the idea of there not being a God. You don't have to be afraid. In fact, if there's not a God, that's actually good news. That means we can actually we can start learning more about the universe, learn about objective values, and explore the idea that there could be objective moral values. So this is just something for you guys to think about. I'd love to get your feedback on it. And other than that, we'll talk soon. Thanks.